Hey YouTubers. I didn't plan to go live tonight. I much felt just like relaxing and watching TV, maybe doing a little reading, making a decent, but you know, I cannot get over that we live in the United States in a day and age when a Supreme Court nominee goes up there in front of the United States Senate's Judiciary Committee and basically pleads with them. I mean, he did nothing to defend himself from the accusations. I didn't do it. These people, they said that I was the best in my class, and I'm proud of that distinction. I'm proud that my daddy played football with me on Sundays. I'm proud that my parents sent me to an all boys school. I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, folks? I'm not saying that I believe for a New York second the lies that have been perpetuated by the Democrats as to the level and the extent of Brett Kavanaugh's conduct. But in the same token, I don't feel that his temperament, his the way that he carries himself, his demeanor is befitting a member of the Supreme Court of the United States. I mean, yes, he went to an Ivy League school and this and that, but that's not a test. It's like Trump. It's not a testament to the man's acumen. It's a testament to the socioeconomic status that he was born into. Okay? Not a single person out there can demonstrate to me it can demonstrate not a single person out there can demonstrate to me one significant or viable accomplishment that this man has obtained on his own or even in his own name. Okay, yes, the guy went to one of the most expensive prep schools on the East Coast. Admitted, a prep school that has a 92% acceptance rate to Ivy League colleges. Admitted. Okay? I mean, the facts are there, folks. Okay? Exactly, Glenn. You hit the nail on the head. Okay? He came off looking like a buffoon. All right, I mean, if that's the level of legal acumen that we're putting up to the Supreme Court of the United States to throw yourself at the mercy of the Senate Judiciary Committee without one substantive point or one cerebral argument to make in your defense, but rather just sit there and say what a great guy you are and how admired you were in high school and all these other things. Okay, this isn't a PR show, folks. I mean, there's serious, serious issues that have to be resolved. But in the same token, I am proud of the fact that the president had enough backbone to keep his name in the game because it becomes dangerous to American democracy and our form of government when we allow Supreme Court nominees or any nominee for confirmation, whether it be a cabinet member, a sub cabinet post, or a judicial post, to be derailed simply by a baseless or emaciated accusation. And in this case, I'm not convinced that it is. I think that I'm not saying I believe her enough because I don't, but it depends on what evidentiary standard you use. And I was explaining this to two friends before. When we talk about preponderance standard of evidence, right? Which, I mean, granted, there's no standard that the Senate. I don't, Denise. I think she's an exaggerator. Denise, I think that Ford is an exaggerator. But here's why I don't rule her off as a liar. All right, and I'm going to explain why. When we say when we use the preponderance standard, it means more likely than not occurred, right? Now, in this case, we can establish that Ford and Kavanaugh knew each other. That makes it 5% likely, or not even 5%. That makes it 2% likely that it occurred because they knew each other and they had a casual acquaintanceship. That's 2% out of 51%. The fact that they were at the same party, admittedly, in 1981, where you had underage kids getting drunk, that takes you up to about 10% that it happened. And now we veer away from the circumstances and we look at the characters. So now we've established a 10% likelihood that it occurred. All right. Now, I think it was dangerous today. And I'm not sure whether it was dangerous for the better or dangerous for the worse. That he admitted that he had a drinking problem. And he also admitted that that he did get drunk on occasion and rough up his college roommate. Okay? I mean, yes, Denise, they were kids, but in the same token, I mean, for him to admit that he is somebody that gets drunk, and when he gets drunk, he gets aggressive and he fights with people physically, in conjunction with the fact that he was at a party with this girl. I mean, that offers food for thought. It's not like he's a happy drunk. It's not like he's a drunk that just he's mellow and chill. I mean, even you could tell by his temperament today, this is a very aggressive guy. I mean, maybe you disagree with me, but I say if I was one of the senators, there is at least a 30 to 40% chance that he engaged in some form of sexual. Yeah, Denise. But look at the bigger picture, okay? Let's not look at policies and politicians that we support and don't support. Let's not think of it through that ocular or through that optic. Think of it neutrally, okay? You have a guy who knew the girl. You have a guy who was drunk at the party with the girl. You have a guy who knew the girl, was at the party drunk with the girl, and by his own admission has a history of violence while drunk. Are you starting to see the picture I'm painting? I'm not saying I like the picture because I don't, but what I do think is that there's meat at the bones. Is there a lot of meat? No, there isn't, because her side of the presentation wasn't able to provide a great deal of evidence. Yes, he admits he still drinks up to this day, Denise. He admitted in his confirmation hearing at around the 3-hour 40-minute mark that he gets drunk on occasion. Yeah, and he's up for the highest court in the land. But forget that. Forget that for a second. Okay, let's look at her allegation. All right. Her allegation was vague, as I predicted. I said it was going to be vague, and it was very, very vague. Because he got up there and he had to rebuff a vague allegation. She said that they were at the party, and the majority of her testimony past the party and the details of the night and the details of the name Kavanaugh and the details of knowing his face at that time well enough to recognize it on a daily basis. I mean, she had enough there. Now, here's what I don't agree with either side with. The fact that she waited 30 some years to come forth without filing a report. I think there's an explanation to it, but I don't think the explanation has been hit home by anybody. And here are my thoughts on that. When we're talking about sexual assault, there's a different attitude about sexual assault in 2018 than no, Denise. It's not the explanation, Denise. Okay, I mean, you admit the guy's a drunk. You admit the guy's a very aggressive drunk. I mean, he's a very aggressive, and then you admit that the guy's a very aggressive drunk that has a history of fighting with people. I mean, what more do you need? I mean, he has a history of violence while drunk, and we're going to put him on the Supreme Court of the United States? What's next? We're going to go through every single Kroll hearing and sex offender civil commitment hearing, and we're going to decide if there are any apt candidates in that group? No, I don't. But in the same token, I don't like Christine Ford Blasey. I do think that she's an opportunist. Christine Ford Blasey is a lady who knows that her career is on the downswing and she's looking to bolster it. No shit. But do I think that something happened to her? Yes. Yes. I do think that something happened to her. Now, do I think that things went down the way that she said they did? No. But here's, in my opinion, let me get to this, why I don't think that she came forward. We have a different attitude of sexual assault in 2018 than we did in 2008. And in 2008, we had a different conception of sexual assault than we did in 1998 or 1988. Okay? I mean, I've never been a fan that we should think about drug testing or blood testing the people that we're going to have sex with to see if they're too drunk or not too drunk. I don't agree with that. But in the same token, these days, if you report rape, it is handled so methodically that it's handled as an exact science. I guarantee you, due to the socioeconomic status of his family and the political clout that his parents wielded in early 1980s Maryland, that if she would have reported it, she would have been the one that was made to look like the villain. She would have been vilified and she would have been disgraced. All right. And that's the reason why she didn't report it. And anybody can understand that. I mean, I can recall on top of my head 10 to 20 legal cases from the early 1980s, all right, where people were raped or allegedly raped, and they went to the police departments, and the cops said, "Are you sure, sweetie? You really just didn't have buyer's remorse in the morning, and you didn't want your daddy to know," and shit like that. And now you take the 1980s sentiment and cynicism and skepticism about rape survivors, and you combine that with the fact with somebody who's living in the top 1%, you tell me. I think it's pretty self-explanatory why she didn't report it. If it happened. If it happened, I think that there's a very good reason why she didn't report it. They were living in 1980s Maryland where his parents had a shit ton of money, and his mother was a state district court judge, and they could have easily backfired on her, and it could have easily screwed her over. Okay, and I even know cases where legitimate rape survivors in the 80s and 70s, were prosecuted for filing false police reports. I mean, who would take that type of risk? So, Denise, while I love you and you're a valued subscriber and a valued friend, I don't agree with you. I mean, you're admitting yourself that you had a similar experience and the authorities at hand didn't believe you. Why is it so implausible to believe that this lady was intimidated for the longest time by some rich kid with politically powerful parents, and that was at least partially attributable to the reason why she didn't report it? I think that's a very plausible explanation. You may not, I do, you know? But let's say he's not even guilty of the rape. Do you think somebody that handled himself the way that he did today belongs on the Supreme Court of the United States? And Denise, that's not factually true. And I want to get to that in a minute. She did allegedly tell people, because there were what's called affidavits that were presented. An affidavit is a certified statement in a court of law that allows a court to make a preliminary decision. Now, should they have been admitted to the U.S. Senate today? Absolutely not. But the Senate isn't a court, okay? What the Senate's only holding this hearing as a courtesy to Kavanaugh to allow him to flush out the facts. The Senate has no obligation to give Kavanaugh due process. But in the case of Blas Ford, she presented 4 affidavits from very prominent Californians, including her therapist, that allege that she told them shortly thereafter. Well, no, that was one of the affidavits. And the other affidavit, she only disclosed the identity of him in 99 to 2 people. And the reason for that was that at that time, Brett Kavanaugh was a very high-ranking official in the Justice Department's Office of Independent Counsel. Who could have blamed her? I mean, I wouldn't want, I mean, if I were in her shoes with the type of power this guy had, you think I'd want to go around reporting it? Hell no. I mean, you think your suffering's bad. It only gets worse. The IRS gets on your case. I mean, everybody else. I don't need that kind of stress. Neither did this lady. I mean, but in the same token, do I think that there are a lot of unanswered questions that she didn't provide convincing answers to? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, she still hasn't provided any secondary witnesses that had him at the party. She still hasn't answered the fact as to why she didn't come forward in 2006 while he was up for nomination to confirmation to the DC Circuit. So yes, there are unanswered questions. Okay, but in the same token, I think that even with these allegations aside, I don't think that this guy should be on the Supreme Court. He doesn't strike me as particularly bright, number one. Okay. The guy's up there and the guy's not able to provide answers to very simple questions. Okay. He goes in there and he doesn't have the character to man up and to fight the allegations on their merit. Instead, he keeps on introducing these accolades, which makes him a braggart. I mean, this is not the guy that belongs on the Supreme Court of the United States. Denise, when Trump nominated Gorsuch, I had no love lost for Gorsuch. And the reason for that wasn't political. It was because Gorsuch subscribes to a judicial ideology that is shifting. He doesn't subscribe to textualism like Scalia did in the same sense. Gorsuch subscribes to a form of originalism and constructionism that belies the judicial ideology of Scalia. If Gorsuch can find a historical example or identifier, even if it wasn't one that the framers considered, he'll use it. And that's absurd because if the framers didn't consider it, then Gorsuch shouldn't use it. But in the same token, I think, and I firmly believe this, right now that Neil Gorsuch is a gentleman. I think he's an extremely bright man. I think he's somebody that, yes, his mother had quite a bit of political clout, but I think that I think he was middle class and he had to pull himself up by his bootstraps in some aspects. His mother died while he was very young. I love you too, Denise. We just don't agree. I mean, it's fine. But I do like Gorsuch. Gorsuch was a good pick for the seat he had to fill. He was a good pick. He really was. Who do I like? I like Richard Posner. Okay, right now, if Richard Posner wasn't 80 years old, I would want Trump to nominate him in a heartbeat. Okay, because Richard Posner is the one federal judge who, whenever he has an article out or a new book, it makes every single Supreme Court justice cringe. Okay, because his points possess a type of intellectual merit and substance that most people in both parties want just to go away. They don't want to ignore, they don't want to address the points that Richie Posner has to offer. But he would have been a much better pick than this guy. I mean, Posner's written, I don't know, some like 300 or 400 books that deal with every major constitutional question in our history, or at least every constitutional topic in our history. He's qualified. I mean, he's a conservative, but what he is not is an ideologue. This guy that they appointed, do you know what this guy spent the first 5 years or the almost a decade of his career doing? Being George Bush's personal assistant. I mean, when he worked in the White House, he wasn't working in the White House in a legal capacity. He was the White House executive assistant. Okay, this guy's a politician. He's not really a judicial scholar in the conventional sense. He's a politician with a first-rate education and a lot of money from his mommy and daddy to back him up. Neil Gorsuch was a judicial scholar within every meaning of the definition. Richard Posner is a judicial scholar within every meaning of the definition. This guy, he doesn't impress me. And I'm going to make a prediction right now. I don't think that he's going to get confirmed. I don't. I really don't. But in the same token, the more that this guy talks, you're not going to tell me that they didn't have an idea of what was going to come out. Okay, they may not have known the ins and outs of it, but they had a damn good idea that this guy was going to run into some speed bumps with the Senate Judiciary Committee. And with that being said, you know something? I think he was a decoy nominee, much like Harriet Miers was in 2004 when George Bush tapped her for the court. Okay, they knew that they were going to have a hard time getting Alito confirmed, unless what? Unless they nominated somebody 10 times less qualified that made him look like an angel. That's what's going to happen next, folks. Okay, right now, Trump's next pick is going to be a sitting federal appellate judge that nobody likes, but he's going to look like Prince Charming next to this guy. I mean, that's just the cold, hard reality of it. I know that my views are unpopular. I get that. But they're not views. They're not views. They're a certain perspective of what's going on, and they're factually based. I mean, does anybody think that this guy carried himself well today? I don't. I mean, I don't see how you can. I mean, yes, his statement wasn't prepared. But, you know, I think that 90% of the lawyers out there with his education and his background could have gone up there and could have done a hell of a lot better than what he did. Okay, even when John Roberts was on the hot seat, John Roberts went round for round with every senator on the committee without talking over them. Senator, no. I'm not going to let you get away with that, Senator. Okay? When you're a Supreme Court nominee, you don't talk like you're a schoolyard bully. You don't talk like you're getting ready to throw down with a United States senator. I mean, give me a break, folks. I mean, that's just my opinion. But what I think is going to happen is this, okay? We're in an election year, all right? We're close to, we being the Republican Party, we're close. Exactly, I agree with you, Glenn. Totally. He didn't impress anybody today. We're close to losing control of both houses in the midterm. Now, Susan Collins is a political savvy lady. She didn't get where she is in life by being stupid. Susan Collins is going to vote against the Kavanaugh nomination to the court. That's one Republican out of 51 that you lost. Okay? And after she votes against it, Murkowski's going to vote against it. Jeff Flake, who the hell knows and who the hell cares? Because they're still going to be 2 votes shy. And I'll tell you what, I don't think you're going to have a single Democratic senator that's going to vote to confirm this guy. Okay? But not just for reasons that we discussed today. He's written a lot of opinions that really don't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. And they reek of conservative judicial activism, which is just as bad as what the liberals do. Okay, folks, they all do it for different reasons. But when it comes down to it, we have a constitution, and the constitution deserves the true faith and allegiance of being interpreted the way that it was intended to be, which isn't to make up the law as you go along. Well, with that being said, folks, I'm gonna come back on later on around 9 or 10 to do another stream on a totally unrelated topic. But